so again, even prior to the December 3rd referendum in Guyana, especially earlier this year, there's been a crackdown on journalists and activists who've been very critical of the state's relationship with Exxon. You had a sort of rumored oil spill, and it was rumored, and then you heard that the government cleaned it up, but people didn't get any more information after that. So obviously that caused righteous outrage. It's also the case that some people have just lost their homes and their lands because of Guyana's past as a cooperative socialist republic. You can slate sort of land for development, and then since it's for the public interest, you can basically tell people this land is now being taken away by the state and they have to move elsewhere. And so the government has been instituting different schemes for Guyanese in Guyana and also Guyanese in diaspora, sort of get free land to build a house, but on the condition that that house or that land is being used more so in the interior and not on the sort of coastal regions that these oil corporations need to continue on in oil exploration and building pipelines to extract the oil that they find in the starboard block and elsewhere. And so you had protests against that where, you know, land tenure, housing are all becoming bigger issues. And these have all been connected to Exxon. You also had a survey in February of this year where I think it was over 70% of Guyanese said that oil will not help them or development for the country. Around 13% of them said that they didn't know. So you have a mass majority of people in a country being told, you're the next Qatar, you're going to join the ranks of states like Saudi Arabia, where the majority of people are just like, no. I was there 2 years ago and I had a cousin tell me that they're like renting apartments in places for 10,000 US a month. And I thought that he was lying, but he drove me around and it was actually true. And so obviously there is this sort of distinction that is being clearly built in Guyana regarding us versus them. It makes it a bit more easier for people to protest because it's obviously like, why are all of these buildings going up for these people associated with oil? And then we're being policed or kicked out or told not to protest. And I think that that's also why you've seen a lot more people taking sort of the practices of Exxon and the relationship between ExxonMobil and the government to the courts. And that's also why in a lot of the court cases against Exxon in Guyana, you see the Guyanese government or the Guyanese Environmental Protection Agency listed as a co-defendant with Exxon. Like it is very clear to people that you know, the government is in some ways captured or is in cahoots with the sort of faulty types of development that Exxon is engaged in, and people viewing the deal as disastrous because Exxon is making billions and billions of dollars from oil in Guyana since 2019. And the Guyanese government has basically gotten some millions and are telling people to be satisfied with that. And so the fact that Guyana has the worst oil deal in the world is also something that is popularly or commonly known in Guyana. And so I situate all of these protests and all of these things to say that that was the situation in Guyana at the beginning of this year and into the summer. And now all of a sudden Venezuela does this referendum saying that people in Guyana are living in misery because the government is captured by ExxonMobil. And that's the first time Venezuela says anything about sort of the protest situation in Guyana. It never lent words of solidarity when Guyanese were protesting against Exxon. It never told the government that it shouldn't be cracking down on journalists or activists that are protesting against Exxon. Its literal first instance of even mentioning the fact that Guyanese are upset with its government is through this referendum that essentially says Venezuela wants to annex over half of the Guyanese territory. And it is Venezuela who has all of the know-how or wherewithal to extend contracts to people in these regions. And so then even Guyanese are like, but wait a minute, Venezuela just wants to use oil to exploit in the region, and they're upset at Guyana or mad that Guyana is doing it. And so then you have people who've been vocally against sort of the government and Exxon dealing, feeling as if they have to take this firm stance, saying no, Guyana's territory is Guyana's territory. Let's share this, you know, government clip or this Exxon clipping that essentially recognizes that this is Guyana's territory. And so in turn, what you have is that there's a push away from people protesting towards, you know, as we saw in Venezuela, a type of nationalism in Guyana, where people were supporting and sharing, even on my social media, these nationalistic commercials little children in Guyana saying Esquivos, Rios, this is how many regions make up Guyana, this is where our borders are. And that's because people had this real fear of not wanting any sort of annexation to occur. People were very, I am Guyanese, I am not Venezuelan. And so you saw protests against Exxon and the government quiet down in favor of people sharing sort of nationalistic government videos and government posts saying that, you know, Guyana is Guyana. And so it had the exact opposite effect if Venezuela wanted to extend solidarity, which it didn't. That's why I called it chauvinist in its assertion, where people who were protesting the government and Exxon all of a sudden had to take a stand saying, wait a minute, we are Guyanese, this is Guyana, and we don't want Venezuela coming in.